This was our first trip to Taiwan, and this video might not cover everything, but here are some things that we learned that we wish we'd known beforehand. Taiwan is a small sweet potato-shaped island country undergoing rapid growth in infrastructure. Over the course of its history, it's been colonized by many groups of people such as the Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, and Dutch. It's a mix of old and new, traditional and modern, resulting in a very unique country with a distinct flair. Taiwan is a huge art hub, and it has a lot of independent markets as well as murals which showcase their love of art. You can find a lot of these things as souvenirs, which we'll discuss later. We found that Taiwan was a safe country to travel to as long as you remain vigilant, and civilians are very friendly and helpful no matter where you go. Some things to note before entering Taiwan: they're really strict with their biosecurity laws, so you can't bring any meat in whatsoever. This is especially the case for beef and pork, but does also include some things such as fresh plant and animal products. If you are caught with these, and they do have sniffer dogs to help them out, you can be hit with a 1 million Taiwanese dollar penalty, which equates to about 33,000 USD. Hygiene. We recommend the usual following of 3 wet wipes, tissues, and hand sanitizer. This is just to make sure that you are at the peak of your health, because after all, you really don't want to get sick on a very short holiday. Public bathrooms we found to be clean and can't remember anything out of the ordinary. Is that a weird thing to say? No. Language. There are a lot of languages spoken in Taiwan, including a lot of indigenous language like Formosan languages, but the 2 main languages that they speak are Mandarin Chinese and Taiwanese Hokkien. English isn't a common language spoken in Taiwan. People might have trouble communicating even in basic English, so please try your best. The Taiwanese people are very friendly and patient, so they'll try their best too. For the most part, signs aren't in English, unless at super touristy areas such as the bigger attractions, like malls, transport hubs, or some sightseeing spots. Menus are generally not written in English unless aimed towards tourists or international audiences, such as in Chun Shui Tang. Even for bubble tea stores, we found that some of them didn't have English menus, so just be careful of that. We hardly speak any Chinese, basically none, and we got by mostly by doing our best in Mandarin, but also using pictures and hand gestures, which I think is pretty common when you're traveling. We recommend learning some basic phrases in Mandarin. What I would highly recommend is learning to recognize by ear numbers and also learning to read animals and meat, so at least you could recognize what you're eating. Don't forget the basic phrases such as please and thank yous. Weather! Since Taiwan is an island country, the climate is pretty temperate. You don't need to expect it to be too extreme at either end of the scale. As long as you know what season you're getting into, you should expect the appropriate temperature and weather. Transport! There are 2 main transport cards that you'll find in Taiwan, EasyCard and iPass. For the most part, and everyone will say this, they are interchangeable. However, the main difference is that EasyCard originated in Taipei, while the iPass originated in Kaohsiung, which is in the south. For the most part though, you can buy either of the passes basically throughout anywhere in the country. But since we landed in Kaohsiung, we just bought the iPass. One of the major differences we found, which we also mentioned in our Maokong Gondola video, is that since the EasyCard is based in Taipei, we found that the Maokong Gondola only uses the EasyCard in order to get up and down. Otherwise, you can buy tickets normally, just like any other attraction. This has been the case since we were there in April 2019, but might have changed or might be updated in the future. The transport cards are 100 Taiwanese dollars, and you have to top up a minimum of another 100 Taiwanese dollars. So in total, expect to pay 200 Taiwanese dollars when you buy the card. They can be topped up at train stations like normal transport cards, but also at some convenience stores too. Rides are discounted compared to not having the card, but it's also a really convenient way of not having to pay for a new train ticket every single time you want to go somewhere. This is especially convenient if you want to store a lot of cash on there at first and use it up slowly, especially because you can use it in convenience stores and in some stores such as some bubble tea places, I think. The cards don't expire, so we recommend buying them no matter how long you're gonna be in Taiwan. Buses!
Searching the bus route is really easy. Google Maps is very efficient for this. As long as you know where you're going and where you're coming from.
You can download bus apps to tell you the routes and the timetable, but you'll have to download a new app every time you change cities.
For the most part, we use Godersu. It's not super convenient in finding the best route from A to B, but we did use it in order to know the real-time location of the buses that we're planning to take.
So this is what we did. We used Google Maps to find which bus to take,
and then the app to know when the bus was going to arrive.
Public bikes. Bikes are a very common mode of transport in Taiwan. Public bike rentals will differ in each city, so we'll cover it as we talk about each city individually.
Intercity travel. For the most part, if you're taking public transport, from the slowest to the fastest, you can take buses, trains, or the high-speed train. You can check out the TRA, Taiwanese Railways Administration website for more details on how to take the trains and the high-speed rail trains. But the high-speed rail trains are a little more expensive. You can use your transport card for the normal trains and they'll discount it as you use it. And for the high-speed rail trains, you can buy online off their website or on the day from the ticketing stations.
For example, going from Taichung to Keelang, we took the normal speed train. Had we used the high-speed train, the difference in time would have been about an hour, and in price, it would have been about 150 Taiwanese dollars.
The normal railway trains are pretty much like your subway trains, but with toilets. Not exactly the cleanest toilets in the world, but it's there. In terms of the high-speed rail trains, we never took it because we're cheap, but I believe you can book seats like you would for a normal coach train.
Taxis! Taxis are still predominantly used in Taiwan instead of apps such as Uber. Taxi is the biggest form of non-public transport because it's not too expensive. The base rate is about 100 Taiwanese dollars. Motorbikes are pretty common to see in Taiwan. Sometimes they do use the pedestrian footpath because it's very convenient for them, so be careful of that. It wasn't a common occurrence, but it still will happen at times, so watch out for motorbikes. Money. The currency used in Taiwan is Taiwanese dollars, and it's about 30 Taiwanese dollars for $1 US.
Taiwan is still predominantly a cash-based country, with the exception, of course, of malls and some of the major convenience stores or sightseeing attractions.
We stuck to cash, so we can't really say much about credit cards, but I'm sure you'll be able to use it like you would for other traveling countries.
You can use credit cards for major restaurants, such as when we went to the Yongxian vegetarian dim sum restaurant in Taipei.
But as long as you're planning to do very local things like going to night markets, you should expect to bring cash with you.
The bills are denoted in 100, 200, 500, 1,000 and 2,000 Taiwanese dollar bills. The coins are in 1, 5, 10, 20 and $50.
It's common to see $100 bills, but anything above $500 is not so common. Each bill is largely distinguishable by color, so you should have no problem at all when using them.
As we mentioned before, EasyCard and iPass transport cards can be used as stored value cards, so you can top it up beforehand and use it in places like convenience stores.
Before we move on, there's one more very important thing we forgot to mention, and that's currency exchange. In Taiwan, there are 3 main places you can get your currency exchanged. That is the airport, banks, and some department stores, with there being some exceptions here and there. Currency exchange in Taiwan requires you to fill out forms and put in your personal details, so it might be a little time-consuming and complex for some people. So what we recommend to do if you plan to have cash with you in Taiwan is to either get your currency exchanged in the airport or in your country before you leave. Back to the video. SIM cards?
We went with Changhua, which is apparently the largest telecoms company in Taiwan, which usually means the best coverage. But other options include Taiwan Mobile, Far East Tone, Far East One, and T-Star. The rates are generally the same regardless of which company you use.
Prices will vary on how long you need the SIM cards for and what kind of plan you use. We bought ours at Kaohsiung Airport, and I think the airport is generally the best place to buy a SIM card. Food.
Since it's a small country, there's not too much variation, but you'll find that there is actually a distinct cuisine between Taiwan and mainland China.
There are regional specialties, but we found that these regional specialties are generally found throughout the entire country.
For example, dan zai mian from Tainan can be found generally throughout the country now. And same with bak wan, which is also from Tainan. Restaurants.
For ordering, there are usually two methods. The first is to order verbally, as you usually do. The second way, which is quite normal in Taiwan, is that you can find an order card which you fill out by writing your table number, whether you want takeaway or eat-in, and then ticking the items that you want to order.
If you aren't comfortable with ordering verbally like we sometimes weren't, what we tended to do was take a photograph of the menu, zoom into the item that we wanted, and point it to it on our phones. There are usually three methods of paying. Number one is pay as you order. Number two is paying when you receive the food but before you start eating. Number three is paying after you've eaten. For the most part, this is common in permanent restaurants and sit-down eateries.
No tipping for you Americans! Woohoo! How do you find good food? We found that no matter where you go in Taiwan, there will always be really delicious places to eat at.
The best way to find delicious restaurants is to use Google Maps. Search in Google Maps the name of the dish either in English or Chinese, and because a lot of restaurants in Taiwan focus on one dish in particular, you can usually find a restaurant with that dish in its name.
Taiwanese people seem to trust Google reviews to map out their favorite places to eat. So if you can find a lot of Taiwanese locals eating and cheering on one restaurant in particular, then it must be a good place to eat at. Our Eat Your Neighborhood series in Taiwan was focused on this method of researching food places to eat.
You can check us eating our neighborhoods in Tainan, Keelung, and Taipei. Ordering to share is fine as long as you're courteous and not ordering something like one small bowl of noodles between 5 people.
It's common to do self-serve in Taiwan. Things like cutlery, tissues, and condiments are either provided on a communal table, which you can walk up and grab your things that you want, or it's provided on the table that you sit at. So help yourself. It's no extra charge to use what's on the self-serve tables, but obviously you should be courteous of how much you're consuming.
If there's not too many people in your group, you may find yourself sharing a table with other people. This is pretty normal, just be courteous of that too. For vegetarians, it's very easy to eat in Taiwan. Because Buddhism is one of the biggest religions there, they do focus a lot on vegetarian food. There was a big campaign also in Taiwan to encourage people to eat meat-free at least one night a week, and it's something that they've adopted really well.
Check out our vegetarian dim sum for an example of really tasty vegetarian food in Taiwan.
Woo! Night markets.
Not all night markets open every day of the week, so we recommend checking to see whether the one that you want to go to is open on the day you're planning to go. Google Maps tends to have very accurate opening days, and also check our website for recommendations and also opening times and locations.
The night markets tend to be split up into 3 parts: food, games, and merchandise such as clothes.
For food stalls, there are either stalls where you take away finger food, which is pretty normal, or even sit down and order stalls, which tend to sell proper dishes. Please do not sit down at these stalls if you're not planning to eat there, out of courtesy of the stall owners and other customers who want to eat there.
To some extent, you can find generally the same foods throughout all the night markets. These are things like QQ bowls, skewers, papaya milk, milk tea, fried squid,
fried chicken, Taiwanese style sausages, bakery bread. In particular, there are also some food items that night markets are famous for, and you can usually identify these by the long queues.
For example, possibly the most famous example is in Raohe night market, where you can find Fuzhou style pepper buns.
There are some items that are only in a couple of night markets that we've been to. For example, coffin toast in Garden Night Market in Tainan, milk mochi in Wuxing Night Market in Tainan as well,
salted egg taro balls in Ningxia Night Market in Taipei, but you can also find this in the Raohe Night Market.
Night markets provide rubbish bins, which is really handy because we found that in general public spaces they're actually quite hard to locate.
We recommend watching all of our night market videos. Throughout all of it, we generally try everything that you can find in a night market, even if some items are only in specific night markets. That way it'll give you a good idea of what to expect and what foods you might like to try for yourself.
Keelung Night Market seems to be the exception. While on one half they have normal food stalls, but on the other half they actually have permanent sit-down eateries, which sell pretty unique things to Keelung.
Go watch our Keelung Night Market videos, there are 3 of them.
Yes, it is a very unique dynamic.
In any case, don't get stressed out with what you need to eat in a night market. If you see something you like, go ahead and order it because it's probably going to be good.
Convenience stores
And supermarket.
7-Eleven and Family Mart are the most well-known chains. You can also find things like OK Mart, High Life, and other independent convenience stores.
They're pretty easy to find and the shelves tend to be quite abundant. You have quite a similar choice between each one.
The prices don't tend to differ from chain to chain, so don't be too stressed out about getting the best deal.
Since it's so hard to find rubbish bins in Taiwan, we usually popped into convenience stores to throw things away. Seems like Taiwan doesn't have too many public rubbish bins.
Supermarkets like Carrefour, PX Mart, and Welcome are relatively easy to come by. It's highly likely there will be one in the area that you're staying in.
They're not huge, but they're bigger than convenience stores.
Souvenirs!
Pineapple cakes are the most obvious souvenir that you'll think of when you go to Taiwan. There are differences between each pineapple cake. One of the main differences is that cheaper pineapple cakes will use a mix between pineapples and winter melons in their jam because winter melon is a lot cheaper. So these tend to be a little more jelly-like in texture, a little sweeter as well.
You can usually get the sweet versus sour pineapple cakes. We prefer the sour, but they happen to have a flavorful and more tart sour profile. Famous pineapple cake shops will have very good ones, but we will not argue that some are so much better than others.
For the most part, you can taste the difference between each one if you really think hard about it, but really it's not by much.
Handmade or not, there are a lot of souvenirs in Taiwan. They're really capitalizing on the growing tourism industry, with many shops at tourist destinations, sometimes having signs in English and even Japanese and Korean.
A couple of times we've been hit with the claim that something is handmade or special only to this area, only to find the exact same product in a different city.
Is it a scam? Not necessarily. If you like the product, you might as well buy it. But it might be important to keep in mind that you might be paying for a product which is not as unique as you might believe.
I mean, if you like it, right, doesn't matter.
Yeah, and they're not generally that expensive. Kaohsiung!
It is quiet. It's a port town and it's pretty spread out but very clean.
The city felt a lot smaller, but it also felt like it was developing very quickly.
Because the infrastructure is rapidly growing, it is one of the best places where you can find public transport, and that's probably why the iPass originated there as well. It's one of the only cities with its own subway line besides Taipei.
Public bikes. As of recording this video, Kaohsiung is probably one of the only places where you can still rent public bikes for free.
You either need to register your transport card with a Taiwanese ID, which you're not going to get unless you're actually Taiwanese, or you can use a credit card, which is what we did.
The first half hour of renting a bike is free as long as you return it on time. You still need to use your credit card for this rental, but they will not charge you if you return it within the half hour.
You rent them by inputting the details of your credit card, pulling the bike out. You can usually find English instructions on the screen. You also need your credit card details as well when you return the bike. You can either do this by inputting the number on the screen or using the card and plugging it in. And that's pretty much it. Tainan!
It's a little older than the other cities that we visited, but it's more compact and still nice and clean. There are a lot more areas to visit and things to do, such as night markets and shopping streets.
The public transport is still a little bit developing. They do have a very good bus system, but as for the train line, it's mostly the huge train line that runs throughout the whole country, and it doesn't have its own subway.
You can rely mostly on buses. Seems like bikes are less favored in Tainan.
It was my favorite city in terms of food. There's so many delicious things to eat, such as when we had Eat Your Neighborhood, and also in the night markets too.
Taichung!
Taichung is a developing city, I would say, which is indicated by the newer train stations, which was still under construction when we went there actually. It feels a little more suburban than Tainan, but definitely not as big and in your face as Taipei.
The public transport we felt was similar to Tainan, in which buses were mainly used and surprisingly little bikes. There is one train line that runs through Tainan, but it's a pretty walkable city, so we didn't find that we actually had to use public transport at all.
Keelang.
Keelang is a really old city. It has a lot of tall and very tightly packed buildings. The port is really nice and spacious, so it's really nice to just walk around there and take a couple of photos when you're around.
I think a lot of cruise ships stop there. Since it's a pretty small city, it's fairly walkable and you don't really need the bus. But there are trains and buses in and out of the city if you want to go to attractions such as Jiufen or Shifeng or the Hutong Cat Village. Go watch all our videos. Taipei!
It's the capital!
Since it's the capital, it is quite different from all the other cities we went to.
It's very large and definitely way more urban than the other cities that we went to.
Of course, there are also suburbs, but there's also high-rise buildings and plenty of night markets around.
Taipei has a very trustworthy subway system. We rarely relied on the bus and never used the taxi. The subway line generally got us everywhere that we wanted to go in Taipei. There's also a subway line that goes straight to the airport, so you don't need to take a taxi for that, and it doesn't cost that much either.
Budget shopping in Taipei. We didn't make our own video. Maybe we should have. But the best place to go if you're looking for local unbranded clothes that are fairly cheap in price is the Wufenpu district. And that's fairly close to the Raohe night market too.
It's tightly packed and has a lot of alleys which are covered up, so it's nice to go even if it's raining.
There's pretty cheap clothes ranging from between 150 to 300 Taiwanese dollars, depending on the item.
There are a lot of stores and it extends far further than we honestly originally expected.
There are lots of different styles, such as cute lacy stuff to simple and very specific aesthetic styles. But there's also options for things like men's clothes and some children's clothes too.
They provide plus size fashion, but it looked like curvy at best.
To our surprise, there weren't too many repeating items between each stall, even if their aesthetics are generally in line.
The quality is pretty good considering how cheap the price is. So if you're looking for some fast fashion, then give it a go.
Otherwise, you can also visit the Shida area, which is a little bit more south.
This is a university area, so the feel is quite different from Wufenpu.
They also have a little bit more of a boutique feel throughout their stores, ranging from between around 300 to 600 Taiwanese dollars, and there may not be as many options, but the quality tends to be nicer.
Since it's a university area, they don't just have shopping, they have cafes and other souvenir-like stalls and places to eat at as well.
They also have their very own night market, but we didn't visit it, so we can't comment on how it is.
That was Twin Speaks Tips and Tricks in Taiwan.
I hope that covered everything that we wanted to say.
And I hope it gives you a good idea of how to travel Taiwan without worrying too much like us.
In any case, all of this information that we mentioned in this video will be formatted in some manner in our article, which will be linked in the description below.
We will have more specific tips and tricks as well and list more personal examples of our experiences there, so go take a look if you want more details that we might not have covered in this video. Otherwise, for where we are now, follow us on Instagram at TwinspeakEatGo.
But we'll see you in Korea!
Woo! I bit my lip.